Over coffee and pretzels, the mayor of Heidenheim, Bernhard Ilg, tells me how he was approached by a group of local activists called the Geschichtswerkstatt, or History Workshop, who sought to remove the memorial. The politician has a street named after him in his hometown, is uncomfortable with hero worship. This would be the perfect statue, he says, gesturing to a full-body portrait in his office where the head is missing. But as a conservative with a small c, he's also wary of destroying history. Ilg and the History Workshop tried to work together on a plaque to put on the memorial, but a form of words proved impossible to agree on. Enter Jules in support of his project. Jules had weighed it all up, the mayor says. In front of his work, I asked the artist, why mine victims? Rommel's unforgivable crime in the eyes of many is not the humanity they perpetrated. Why not reflect this directly? The mine victim, Jules says, is the strongest link with the present. It brings the debate home for people today, at least that's the hope. Both Jules and Ilg see the memorial as an example that could be followed. Erecting a counter-sculpture instead of simply inviting rancour or asking them to forget. One feature that Ilg knows is the smallness of Jules' counter-sculpture. With the height of a child, it doesn't seek to dominate the old memorial. It's more like a trip, an invitation to reflection. Jules tells me the same thing. He likes it when people come up to the memorial, accidentally step on the long, fast shadow on the floor, and recoil, like they've trespassed on memory, or the ground under their...
Our pools were mainly the preserve of locals. I heard only a few non-French voices, and the pandemic meant we all had more room to ourselves when we got through the gate. Limited numbers, 200 instead of the usual 500, and mask-wearing staff emphasised this was indeed not a normal session of the day at 11 a.m, which was my canal baptism, took place at an unusually quiet time. When I left 2 hours later, there was a long queue. Parents were playfully reining in children impatient for the water. Modish teenagers posed on dates, and serious swimmers prepped their daily routine. Once through the gate, issued with a lock key and refreshed by an obligatory brisk cold shower, plunging into the canal without my mask felt a joyous freedom. I sensed this mood again when I went back on a hot Sunday afternoon. The 3 pools reflected the local diversity. This serene scene couldn't, though, conceal the difference between me trying to work off a slothful London lockdown and my heavy with their workaday cargo. On the occasional sightseeing boats, the few passengers were mostly French on staycation. Experience. The Piscine de Josephine Baker. Also run by the city, this is where to float while floating. It's in a pontoon on the Seine. Hotel pool. If the canal brought to mind Monet's garden at Giverny, the Josephine Baker was the splashy LA pools of Hockney.
Turn left.
As with the art galleries under COVID, entry was limited and had to be booked online in advance, as lappers and chatters accidentally touched. On a Sunday morning, a flotilla of small children owned by confidence growing. Then in the water, stretching a leg aloft, she unwittingly imitated moves which had made the real-life entertainer, Josephine Baker, famous in the 1920s. The little girl's father told me she'd learned to swim in New York. Next month, this pool's regulars will return after swimming on the coast. And by then, the canal pools at La Villette.
Previous editions of the programme.
Agatha Christie on BBC Radio 4.
You've taken your views of life from stories.
What exactly did you do with your life, anyway?
Pretty romances with love triumphant in the last chapter.
3 tales of crimes of the heart.
She kissed me. A woman's kiss.
Featuring Harriet Walter, James Fleet and Toby Jones.
Are you going to say anything or just stare at me like I'm some kind of animal?
Beginning with the radio premiere of Agatha Christie's The Lie.
Who knows what a day may bring forth.
Today at 2:30.
Professor Neil Ferguson, whose research persuaded the government to implement the lockdown in March, said the plans needed to go further.
I'm somewhat reassured to see this guidance be issued, even if it is a little bit late. I mean, and it is sensible. It shows the need to potentially escalate when you see outbreaks either in schools. We need a very rapid testing protocol to be in place.
The American actor Chadwick Boseman, who was best known for playing the Marvel superhero Black Panther, has died. He was 43 and had colon cancer. He'd been undergoing treatment while making the Marvel films without making his illness public. Black Panther was seen as a cultural milestone for having a largely black cast. Akua Jamfi is the founder of the British Blacklist, which champions the work of African and Caribbean people in the arts. She says Chadwick Boseman changed attitudes towards young black. A rescue boat in the Mediterranean, funded by the British graffiti artist Banksy, has issued a call for immediate assistance. It's picked up more than 200 migrants trying to cross from Africa to Europe in rubber dinghies, and says the European authorities haven't responded adequately. Here's Andy Moore.
The 10-metre-long pink and white boat calls to rescue authorities in Malta and Italy have gone unanswered. In its most recent message, the Louise Michel said the people on board needed a place of safety after escaping untold horror and inhumanity.
Police have begun a murder investigation after a 26-year-old man was shot dead in Birmingham. Officers were called out following reports of gunfire, as Jenny Cooper reports.
The victim was found shortly before 8 o'clock last night on Bagshaw Road in Sketchford, in the east of the city. Officers have sealed off the scene to preserve evidence and are speaking to witnesses and examining.
Police say about 20,000 people are marching through the city to protest against the coronavirus restrictions in Germany. Officials have tried to stop the demonstration, saying the organisers could not guarantee social distancing, but a court over...
Weird question, Joe.
It's a very weird question. So she said hers was 16mm, and I was like, oh, so am mine.
That's destiny.
Yeah, she makes me laugh uncontrollably all the time. We have so much in common that we didn't even realise before talking. We've been practically in the same locations as each other, but never met before now.
Sliding doors.
Yeah. And then we met. And it's just the first time we met, we'd ended up staying up talking for 6 hours straight about absolutely everything and anything.
What made you just think, oh, I really like this guy?
I think he compliments me well because he's quite quiet and I'm quite talkative. I bring out a more chatty side of him, and he sort of
at the roundabout. Take the second exit.
Brings me a bit more down to his level, and he always knows to say the right things whenever I'm upset or stressed out about anything. He's been a rock basically. He knows what's best to say to make me feel better whenever I'm down, or if we want to do something, he is always up for doing anything that I want to do. So we go on little adventures, and we just really for the next month because it's quite ridiculous, and I think he gets frustrated as me. I just kind of look at all of my money as if it's just disposable pretty much. I think I just need to learn to restrain myself really.
I tend to save quite a bit and only spend when necessary.
You have a right.
And Holly likes to spend, and I'm usually the one being do you really need that? And I think I'd like to maybe get on the same level as each other when it comes to
different attitudes to it, and it can be quite a strain for people if they have different attitudes.
Meet Dee Holmes from the relationship charity Relate.
And even if you've got enough money that it doesn't matter, if you're a saver and your partner's a spender, that can be something that can be a problem. And I think it's important for people to recognise their strengths